Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement. Welcome to the Larkcast. Yes, welcome to the Larkcast, my friends. This is Russ, your host today, and I am traveling alone. Yes, Tony is bogged down with work this week. Had to step away for a moment. Cheers to him and the Catico crew for doing good business out there. The kind that keeps you so busy that you have to literally pull away from things from time to time. So, it's me. Yeah, it's me. It's you. In your drive to work or at the gym or your lunch break or whenever it is that you're listening to this episode, I thought I'd hop on here and, well, get into a controversial topic. Yeah. Yeah, why not? Right? Why not? It's controversial because what I'm going to be diving into here is oftentimes at odds with what is often peddled and practiced in the name of Christianity. Yeah. There's a lot of things out there in the name of faith, in the name of being a faithful follower of Jesus. And from what we can tell in the study of the scriptures, when you really just let them say what they say, you know, right? Like no knee-jerk reaction to tidy up what Jesus is saying to fit within what you're already thinking, but to just let it say what it says, you will find yourself coming to a point in life where you go, man, the message of Jesus, it really has been hijacked. Yeah, it has. Yeah, grace got a butt. Faith became like a treadmill, tightrope, you could say. Yeah, it's weird. Growth got tied to the endless consumption of the right sermons. You know, like if you just keep listening, if you keep gaining more and more and more and more knowledge, then you'll finally really experience the freedom that faith was meant to bring. Transformation, I guess you could say, is something you'll encounter. But Jesus seems to be kind of at odds with this whole approach to life, to growth, to change. So before I get too into this, I'm just going to back up for a minute for those of you who are new, and also for those of you who've been tracking with us, and share a little bit of my backstory for just a second, a part that I've actually never shared before. Not on purpose. I just kind of forgot about it until somebody brought this gentleman's name up again, and it just made me think. And it's kind of where I guess I got started on this train about a decade ago. Make a long story short, I couldn't do it anymore. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. After years of leading churches, I kind of was faced between two I guess you could say torn between two realities. The one I was told was the way, and the one that I kept seeing in Jesus. Yeah, yeah. The pressure was always there. It was, man, it was daunting. It was just relentless. This pressure to be something, to build something, to lead something, to grow something, to achieve something for God's fame or His glory or the betterment of the world, or you just, fill in the blank, right? All the all the flags are out there. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was spending my time managing expectations instead of actually living free, living as someone who's been set free, as Galatians 5:1 tells us. And then one day, a neighbor of mine who worked in the marketing and advertising world, he was good at his job. He was a lot of fun to hang out with. We'd share beers and food pretty often. And but he never had any interest in like coming and plugging into what we were doing in the name of church. He'd been there and done that and just wasn't interested in going down that road. But we had a lot of great conversations about faith. And one day he looked at me and he said, He said, "Did you remind me of Anthony Bourdain?" And I laughed. I was like, because I mean, let's be honest, I'm not exactly, traveling the world and eating street food and filming it on TV. But he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about his approach to life. He said, his curiosity, his his raw honesty. Yeah, the way he connected with people and cut through the noise to tell stories that matter, to tell stories that make them feel seen, stories that painted a picture of a reality they may have overlooked. Kind of like how Bourdain did that with food and culture. He says, I feel like you do that with faith. And I'm just wondering what keeps you from just running at it from that angle? Why what's keeping you from just from that approach basically? And the question kind of wrecked me because the truth was that's where I found the most joy. That's what I love to do and wanted to do. I had just been trained to spend all of my time building something that Jesus never told us to build. Uh, Spending all my time on an idea of church, literally, that he never did and never called us to do. It's kind of crazy when you say that out loud, right? Like just and like the irony in it. Like I'm so busy. I told him that. Like I'm so busy doing what Jesus never did or told us to do, and yet I don't have time. And all the members of these churches that I'm leading don't have time to go do what Jesus actually did and told us to do. So yeah, yeah. So I quit. Yeah. Not long after that, I quit and started what's now called Table Network. Tony and I later transitioned it to the start of Lark. And basically, we wanted to just instead of doing what Jesus didn't, we wanted to do what he did. And by that I mean be a friend who was free to help other people live free. We wanted to do that at a personal level, like where I live, here where he lives up in Chicagoland, and and we also wanted to help other people do that because, well, if I'm honest, it's pretty damn life giving. Yeah, it's and the craziest thing about it is it's in those conversations where you're sharing that you actually learn to live and keep learning to live free. Yeah. And that's kind of what gets us into the what I mentioned at the beginning of this short podcast about a controversial topic. And what that is if I had to put a title on it, it's this idea that I've been studying and kicking around for a decade that I can say I feel like with confidence from the scripture and from experience in the real world that sharing stories beats listening to sermons every time, all day, every day. Yep. There it is, folks. I said it. I know. I know. It sounds crazy. And it can sound crazy, I feel like, until you pull back and say, you know what? Maybe there's something here. Maybe, maybe there is something to taking the time to rethink how we actually learn to live free. For centuries, people have debated this topic. They've debated how humans grow, I guess you could say. And you find that not in just the church world, but in academia, right, et cetera. The church world has mostly landed on public speaking as the gold standard for spiritual formation because talks, reels, sermons, they're easy to produce. They're easy to consume. They are a very efficient way of passing on information and stirring inspiration. Yeah. But that's where the impact stops. It is. That's where it stops. So even things like this podcast, the new video series that we just put out, they're all great tools, I feel like, for the sharing of ideas, for getting something started, for seeing something maybe you haven't seen, but that is where the impact stops. Because when it comes to moving from hearing about freedom to actually living in it, even the best talks, the best sermons out there fall short every time. And it's kind of a disconnect that no one seems to, not no one, but most people, I feel like I could say, don't want to talk about. Um, Somewhere along the way, it's like we assume that since preaching shows up in Scripture, okay, a lot in the New Testament, sermons must be how we learn. But we never stop to recognize that preaching and sermons aren't the same thing. They're not. Preaching and sermons are not the same thing. Our brains struggle with that, struggle to see it maybe, because we cling to what's familiar. It's a little cognitive bias called egocentric myopia, meaning we default to what we know. We do. We default to what we know, and we assume it's the only way because that's all we've ever seen or heard about. But if we keep looking at living free through the lens of sermons and spiritual content, we limit our imagination and stunt our growth. And sadly, we limit the imagination, and we can also play a role in stunting the growth of the people we love, our spouse, parents out there, your children, yeah, grandchildren. I got a I got a new little 6 month old grandson right now. It's really got me thinking a lot about this. Friends, neighbors, right? Keep going down the list. Um, to give you just a little like for instance, and what I'm talking about here, the modern sermon, okay, it's a polished monologue from a professional often, right? It didn't exist in the early church. It didn't. It wasn't a centerpiece of church gatherings at all. In fact, it didn't even become a centerpiece until the revivalist movements of the 18th and 19th centuries. So if you're doing the math in your head right now, you're going, wait, so for the first like 1800 years of the church, what I know is the norm and think is that always been the norm didn't even exist. Yeah, it didn't. Crazy, right? Yeah. Yeah, the teaching pastor, right? As a full-time job. Yeah, that's a relatively new gig. Just a small blip in the church's long history. Now contrast that with Jesus, okay? Yes, he gave a few short talks that were pulled together in a little collection in Matthew chapter 5 through 7 called the Sermon on the Mount. He did that really early on in his ministry. But then what did he do? Well, according to the scriptures, he walked away from that format entirely. Luke tells us that he from then on he only taught in parables, like little short stories. Yeah, yeah, he that were in the form of conversation, like literally for the next 3 years. Jesus was eating, drinking, and having unfiltered conversations, passing on relief like a friend, not a lecturer. And that matters because we've been told that preaching is for pastors and happens inside church services, and this is a must in regards to like how we keep growing. But in reality, preaching is for everyone from what we can find in the scriptures. It's not a sermon, and it doesn't look like a planned stage. It looks like an unplanned, open-ended conversation. And the reason is because Jesus knew how humans learn. He's the maker and sustainer of all people, humanity. He's probably, I don't know this. For me, I feel like that kind of gives him a leg up on in regards to like insight about this topic. But the truth is, looking at him and his approach, it's like, yeah, he's telling us words alone don't work. And we know this because every diet plan comes with a promise. Um, it does. Every diet plan comes with a promise. Follow these steps and you'll be shredded in no time. Yeah. It's everywhere on Instagram. And but knowing a plan, right, isn't the same as following it. It's just not. If it were, we'd all have six packs just from reading about them. Jesus, recognizing this truth, okay, invited us into a way of life where experience comes into play. Something known in the academic world as phenomenology. Okay, It's a fancy word, but sometimes, you know, sometimes those fancy words, if you let them mean, but if you let them say what they mean, they really do help us because it's within that word that we're talking about how we perceive and interpret the world around us. You know, phenomenology examines the structures of experience, okay? Providing the ongoing engagement needed for a level of retention that cannot be found in the consumption of content. Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps the best example of this is one I often talk about. It's my favorite example, and that is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Look at how they see learning. Yeah. Knowing that alcoholism is a lifelong disease, AA doesn't offer lectures on addiction. Instead, it creates space for a shared experience, honest conversations, and mutual support for living sober. Likewise, followers of Jesus, knowing the sin of self reliance that runs in our veins is a disease we cannot exercise our way out of, are going to have to move beyond content. Okay. Let it play its role. And I would say once you get a foundation in the faith, let it play a limited role. Um, Realizing words alone don't work. Okay. I'm just saying that again because it's important. Hearing ideas is only the start. Having the right knowledge is powerful, but only when it's practiced in faith. Because without experience, understanding remains limited to what you think instead of impacting what you actually believe. And number two, experience matters. Um, most information, right? It can't do the heavy lifting. It's we need the time. We need to have the time to go learn what we know in the everyday moments of life that turns knowledge into faith. Transformation of the mind, you could say. Transformation of the mind. All right. I'm being, very specific there. It happens when faith is shared, okay, and felt in real life relationships and real situations. That's where it happens. So this sort of 1-2 combination that we find in Jesus's approach, that also seems to be proven right in all of humanity's actual learning, okay, through all the studies that have been done. This 1-2 combination unites open-ended conversation with impromptu teaching that meets people where they are. All right. So think no scripts, no lectures, just real stories, shared learning, and freedom unfolding in real time among friends. It's how Jesus did it. And it's what makes, I feel like it's what makes every, you know, encounter authentic and impactful. And this naturally plays a pretty big role in how we go about living free. The why, I guess you could say. And to get there, I'll just I'll just take a minute to invite you into going back to Jesus and going, all right, when we look to him, we don't find someone who's offering a better sermon series. We find someone who's offering a way of life. This is why when he handed his disciples the keys, okay, just before his ascension in the book of Acts, he didn't say to them and then also to all who follow him, go and start preaching services. Okay. Instead, Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. It's found in Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20. And if you've been in the church world, you might have been beaten over the head with that verse. Yeah. Yeah. Just hearing me read it aloud here on this podcast could be causing an endless amount of anxiety that's jumping around in your bones right now. Oh man, if I had $1 for every time I've misused these words from Jesus, I would be funding Lark all on my own. Yeah. But here's the thing. I don't think we have to fear what he's saying. It doesn't need to bring anxiety. It doesn't need to do anything other than help us pull back and go, oh, wait a second. In the scriptures, if God needed to say something, he could talk to people through an ass. Literally did. Jesus even said the rocks can cry out here, guys. So I think that's the not needing us is one of those things that makes God God. So this verse is not a God who's desperately in need of us to go and fix the world. I think what Jesus is really saying to us here is, I know how you will learn and keep learning to live free. And it's not going to be through the endless consumption of more and more knowledge. It's going to be you passing on what it is that you know and helping others live free. Yeah. Yeah. It's in the sharing of this news, this grace, this freedom. It's in the sharing of it that we actually believe it and keep believing it even more. It's kind of crazy, right? Yeah. I think that's what he's getting at here. Okay. And to help you see what I'm saying, I'll just invite you to actually look at that original text for just a moment, like in the Greek, because you're going to find, like I have, that it sounds very different from the way that we've been taught. You see, in Greek, which which the New Testament, right, is written in, it's you find that verbs can function as imperatives, okay, commands, right, or as participles, like as in describing action. So the word for go here, okay, in the Greek, the word for go here is translated as you are going about your life. Yeah, it's a participle, meaning this isn't a drill sergeant saying, move out. It's not. It's nor is it you know, something that is causing you to think about, booking a one-way flight, to a foreign land in the name of mission. Instead, it the word is it's about being a friend wherever life takes you. Yeah. As you are going about your life, Jesus says, make disciples. Well, there, looking to the Greek, what we find is that this doesn't mean recruit converts and build a religious brand. It simply means help others learn to see who Jesus already is for them. Yeah. See, unlike Jesus, we can't make anything. We can't make anyone anything. Uh, so discipleship, okay, it's less like running a classroom and more like introducing a friend to a perfectly grilled steak. And this, okay, this point right here is where people tend to undo the message of Jesus because they look to what he says next and go, no, 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 no. Right here, he says, he goes on and says, teach them to obey all I commanded. But again, in the Greek, that's not what we find. You see, the word there, obey, actually, in some of your translations is more accurately translated as observe. I know the NIV uses observe, but what we find here is that Jesus is not handing down a rule book instead of a rescue. He's not undoing everything that he has taught us and has been declaring about who God is and life with him in the parables. He's not undoing all that in this moment. Instead, this word literally means treasuring, keeping, holding on to something precious. Yeah, that's what it means. Like a well-worn letter from an old friend, or that one song that you keep handy on iTunes that always takes you back. Jesus, in this moment, is not saying, teach them to follow the rules. He's saying, help them hold on to what I've shown you because it's a treasure worth keeping close. And that is exactly what he did when he walked the earth. Jesus didn't just talk about this life, he lived it. He was not known as the CEO of a new religious organization. He was not known as a great orator who's traveling the world with fantastic 18-minute TED Talks. He wasn't known as a faithful church member who went to services and small groups and volunteered and, go down the list. Jesus was literally known in the scriptures, was referred to as a friend of sinners. Yeah. Yeah. Jesus made friends. He shared meals. He raised glasses. He pointed people to the Father that we've been conditioned to miss. And he helped them see that they were already loved, whole, home, and free. Yeah, that's what Jesus did. In Matthew 28, he's just simply inviting us to, in our everyday moments of life, to go be the friends who do the same. This is the church he intended. This way of life is how not only will others learn to live free, it's how we learn to live free, right? It's in the sharing that we learn to live free. So, yeah, that phrase I used at the beginning, sharing stories beats listening to sermons, can sound controversial until you get into the scripture and let it say what it says. And then you find that it's actually just a beautiful invitation. Yeah. Again, this way of life, this is the church that Jesus intended. It's not a community weighed down by program services and endless sermons. It's a global movement of friends learning to live free by passing on freedom. So, with this said, and this shorter podcast this week, but hopefully something that you find encouraging and helpful. I think I just want to leave you with just this thought. The question in light of what Jesus has shown us here isn't whether you believe in freedom, okay? It's whether you're willing to step into it. Yeah. To trade the comfort of just, consuming content for the messy, beautiful, everyday work of passing on relief as a friend, an unhurried friend. Yeah. A friend who shares grace that's unconditional. A friend who knows that growth is always unplanned and something that just sneaks up on us. Yeah, there's something, man, there's something so good in that, not just for us, but for the people around us. Because this kind of freedom that I've been talking about, the kind of freedom that Lark's been talking about and teaching. And if you're new to this, again, go to the website, larksite.com, click on the free guide. There's some short talks there that they won't do everything that's needed for you to live in freedom, as I've been saying, but they will help you get started. Because just backing up, this freedom, it only grows. It only grows when you give it away. It only grows when you give it away. So give it away, friends. And just again, as always, know we're here to help. Like literally, people give to this ministry because they believe in what's happening and they're seeing lives change. And they know that the plan here is it ultimately provides us with time for real unfiltered conversations. So we're here for that. We're here to help you step into it. So whatever questions you have, ideas you have, pushbacks you have, doubts you have, fears you have, or if you've got some really cool idea, it's bouncing around in your head, reach out. I'd love to chat. I will always make the time. So, yeah, there it is. Russ, traveling alone on the Larkcast this week. Cheers to you, my friends. And until next time, peace.